As usual, we'll start our meeting with the invocation led by Commissioner Thomas.
If you will, join me in prayer. Heavenly Father, Lord, we thank you for the opportunity, Lord, to reconvene here tonight, Lord, to do the work of our people of this county that we call home. Father, we pray a special prayer tonight for those that are going through difficult times. Lord, often we utter those selfish prayers, Lord, for ourselves, but tonight we want to remember the others, be it financial or health reasons or social, whatever the reasons may be. And we just pray a special anointing, Lord, on this board, and as we go forward to do the people's work, that we may do what is acceptable and pleasing, Lord. We pray that we will do what is in the best interest. And Father, we pray that you will be with those men and women abroad in uniform. We pray that you will be with those domestically, Lord, with our EMS, our fire, and sheriff. Lord, that you will be with them and be with their families. We thank you, Lord, for all the blessings that you've given us, not only individual, but us collectively as a county. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Join us for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I think the clerk is having some technical difficulties.
We're having things in stereo up here, so bear with us for a little bit. All right. Next item on our agenda is the Long-Term Care Resident Rights Month 2014 proclamation. And I will share the proclamation that will be presented at the Residents' Right Week. Can y'all get that fixed?
Give me 1 second.
Okay, thank you. All right, as I was saying, the Long-Term Care Residents' Right Month 2014 proclamation. Long-term care, better staff, the key to better care. Whereas there are more than 1.6 million individuals living in 16,000 nursing homes and 1 million individuals living in 50,000 board and care assisted living facilities in the U.S., and whereas the Federal Nursing Home Reform Act of 1987 guarantees residents their individual rights in order to promote and maintain their dignity and autonomy, and whereas all residents should be aware of their rights so they may be empowered to live with dignity and self-determination, and whereas the Union County Board of Commissioners wishes to honor and celebrate these citizens, to recognize their rich individuality, and to encourage residents and others to be educated about staffing and long-term care. And whereas individuals and groups across the country will be celebrating Residents' Rights Month with the theme, Better Staffing, the Key to Better Care, to emphasize the importance of affirming these rights through facility, practices, public policy, and resident-centered decision-making. Now, therefore, the Union County Board of Commissioners does hereby proclaim October of 2014 as Long-Term Care Residents' Rights Month in Union County and encourages all citizens to join in these important observations. Signed the 6th day of October. Thank you very much. All in favor of adopting the proclamation?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None. Next, we have the opportunity, and I'll ask that Vice Chairman Simpson do this recognition.
Well, absolutely. At this time, we'd like to recognize our Register of Deeds, Crystal Crump. If Crystal would come up. You know, we take every opportunity to recognize employees who have given dedicated service to Union County, and we take opportunities when we win awards such as Jeff Yates and his staff, who've won quite a number of financial awards. And of course, we know that Crystal, you're a little bit different in that you're an elected official like us as well. But I would want those across the county to know that you were presented the Outstanding Register of Deeds Award this year, designed to recognize someone who has given extraordinary effort on behalf of the North Carolina Association of Register of Deeds, and also the Eunice Ayers Distinguished Service Award that is presented to a Register of Deeds with at least 5 years of service as an elected Register of Deeds. I just want to take this opportunity to congratulate you on that. I know the ownership of property is one of our most dear things that we recognize here in our country, and to have those folks who guard that process is extremely important. So I congratulate you on those 2 accolades, and thank you for your service to Union County. I really do.
I just want to thank the board for giving me the resources to represent Union County this past year for my association. So thank you.
Thank you.
Well,
All right, thank you very much. And that will take us to our public hearing for FY 2015 Rural Operating Assistance Program application. I move that we open the public hearing. Anybody have any comments on that? Seeing that we have no one signed up to speak, I'll move that we close the public hearing. All right, that'll take us to item letter B, Union County Unified Development Ordinance. I'll move that we open the public hearing.
And if I might, Mr. Chair, recognize Brian Matthews, our Growth Management Executive Director, who will introduce our consultant, who will make a presentation to the board.
All right, come ahead, Mr. Matthews.
Thank you very much. Tonight, of course, we do have a public hearing on the Unified Development Ordinance. Our consultant from Duncan & Associates, Kirk Bishop, will be here. He'll give you a presentation. Some of this information you've heard before. This is an opportunity also for the public that's here to also hear that information. And again, this has been a long process, about a year that we've been working through this. We've attempted to gather as much public input as we can on this project. We've had a stakeholders group that was involved in this. So hopefully at the end of this, we'll have a document that will certainly meet your needs. I'll turn in to Kirk Bishop.
Thank you, Brian, and good evening, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, Madam Manager. Kirk Bishop from Duncan Associates, happy to see you again tonight. Brian described I'm going to take this opportunity tonight as we get close, I hope, to the finish line of a project that Brian charitably describes as taking a year. I think it's taken me a bit longer to get you to this point, but in any case, I feel good about the product and the process, which has been open and inclusive. And I do want to remind us all of some of the substantive changes that are embodied in this new Unified Development Ordinance. I know you have heard about most, if not all of them, in our previous briefings on the module development, but for the benefit particularly of those who might be hearing about it for the first time, I think it would be useful to take you on a quick tour. And it will be, I'll be trying to hit the high points, not trying to describe each and every technical change within the document. If you see a slide with some topic on it, or I've missed something that you were hoping I would hit, I hope you'll take the first opportunity to remind me. This, of course, is a comprehensive overhaul of the existing land use regulations now in effect in Union County. The zoning as well as the subdivision part and the environmental, by and large the environmental part, and sort of reshuffling that entire package of regulations that is now decades old, really, in most of its current forms, into a new Unified Development Ordinance. Not necessarily throwing out everything new, but certainly reorganizing, modernizing, and filling in the blanks to meet the needs of a growing and modern county. It is a team that's been led by our firm, Duncan Associates. We've received assistance over time from Land Design out of their Charlotte office, a firm that I know you're well familiar with from their work on various planning efforts here, including the current comp plan and transportation plan updates. As I mentioned, it's been at least the mid-'80s since most of these provisions have been comprehensively looked at and overhauled, and of course, vast changes have occurred over the 25 or more years since that time. It's been amended over time, and that always results in an ordinance that may become a little bit disjointed as pieces are added on over time. For those reasons, it's sometimes perceived as a little bit difficult to use, and so we're hopeful that once folks learn this new framework and organizational scheme, it'll be a document that's a little easier to navigate and find the information we want when we have a question. As I have at all our meetings, I want to remind us all that this is an amendment to the text of the ordinance. Nobody's property is being rezoned as a part of this effort. We're not changing the basic land use parameters of anybody's property here in Union County. There'll be no changes to the zoning map, just the book. It has been a process, I said, that has really been in 3 distinct phases, and during each one of those phases, we've made an effort to reach out and let folks know that this is happening and take their input regarding the need for proposed changes and their reaction to those proposed changes. We've done that both in face-to-face meetings and use of the internet and the public notices and the like. And we, of course, are at the nearing the very end of that process, the public hearing and adoption process for the new Unified Development Ordinance. Various stakeholder groups have been engaged, from landowners, agricultural interest, private development representative, as well as many on the public sector side, sending out notices to all the municipalities and jurisdictions within Union County and making sure that we engage those folks as well. The participation, honestly, has been a bit spotty. The early part of the process, when people were learning about it, we got a fairly good turnout, and over time, as folks saw that we weren't radically changing things, as sort of interest, I guess, fell off. But we've continued to let people know that the process was ongoing and that we welcome their input. The new ordinance is laid out in about, I guess it looks like 5 key sections, groupings of articles within the ordinance. The zoning districts article sort of establishes the framework in the first part of the ordinance. The various land uses that are allowed pursuant to zoning are described in the second major grouping of articles, Articles 25 through 40. Then there are a series of general development standards dealing with things like parking and landscaping and the infrastructure and public improvement standards that are required at the time of subdivision or major development, and a couple of new provisions that we'll talk about later. The administrative provisions are lumped near the end of the ordinance, unified in a way that'll sort of allow people to navigate. If I want to know about the process involved in getting permit or land use approval, I know that I'm going to go to the administration and procedures section. If I'm interested in zoning questions about which land uses are allowed in which zoning districts and what are the setback height and other rules applied, I know I need the districts chapter. The final part of the ordinance is a couple of articles dealing with reference matters, defining terms and methods of measuring compliance with various standards. As we've gone along, we've, because the document has been completely reshaped and reorganized, it's not been possible to do an exact sort of legislative underline and strikeout version of the document, but we've tried to use footnotes within the document, and where the structure wasn't changed too much, we've been able to use strikeout and underline to allow reviewers of the document to understand where we're proposing substantive changes. So with that, I am going to describe for you a few of the substantive changes. We've added a couple of new zoning districts that will, upon adoption of the ordinance, not be on the map, but would be available for future rezonings, either on behalf of property owners or if there was ever a need for a county-initiated rezoning. We've added a new rural residential agricultural district. It's a little less than a 5-acre minimum area requirement, something a little bit bigger than today's RC 80, the residential or rural conservation district, that's not really been used to date. It requires an 80,000 square foot minimum lot area. The new R80 is a little more generous, preserving rural character consistent with the comp plan and your needs in some of the county, and would be available for use in the future. At the other end of the spectrum, at the little higher density end where public services are available or maybe near municipalities, we've added a new R4 residential district that would allow for much more compact residential development on lots of smaller, 4,000 square feet. Again, neither of those districts mapped until such time as a rezoning would occur. The existing residential districts have been modified in terms of land uses in one key way. Today's residential classification, even the RA 40 and RA 30 or 20 classifications, allow for multifamily dwellings. If you have the adequate lot area, the configuration of how you develop the property in terms of whether it's a detached house or a small apartment building or even a townhouse project is kind of left very, very flexible. That's, I think, caused some problems of predictability for folks, and for that reason, we have recommended in this draft and included in this draft provisions saying that in the RA 40 down to the R 15 district, that those districts are intended to accommodate single-family detached house style development for the most part, and that the multifamily type dwellings would be reserved for those higher density classifications, the R10s, 6, and the new R4 classifications. Some minor adjustments to lot width requirements in the higher density range, increase in building heights within those higher density districts, and again, I'm talking about the R10, R6, R4 style districts. Those districts across the board today are limited to 35 feet in height. We've proposed a modification that would allow the height in those districts to be increased about 10, 15 feet, I think, to accommodate the bigger buildings, multi-unit type buildings. Cluster development continues to be something that the development regulations accommodate, now allowed under the land use ordinance. We're proposing to add the cluster option to the new RA 200 and the existing R15 district. That'll be the cluster option will be available. You, of course, the county those would be reviewed through the subdivision development process. The B1 and B6 districts are eliminated. New density and height limits are established for some of the commercial districts. Again, moving from a flat 35 feet allowed in all districts to, in the higher intensity commercial districts, allowing buildings as tall as 50 feet. Mining district is over. The mining overlay district is eliminated, and we substitute instead the same standards of development, but through a development, through supplemental use restrictions that would apply to any mining use, rather than having to go through the process of establishing a special legislative process for an overlay. Just make those standards apply to any mining or extraction activity in the county, which are allowed only in the highest intensity industrial district today. One kind of big picture change that we've proposed in this draft and we've talked to you about before is the elimination of the existing planned unit development district option and the sort of cumbersome procedures that go with that, in proposing instead a new zoning tool we're calling the master plan development, which is a kind of conditional zoning type option that allows for a whole lot of flexibility on behalf of both the property owner, developer, and the county in reviewing these master plan developments. In doing that, we have established a change to a rule that would require that any changes to existing already approved planned unit developments would come back before the commission. Today, those amendments to approved PUDs are approved by the planning board. Change I wanted to bring to your attention. Master plan development district I mentioned. The allowed uses as today are presented in a table. It's a table that's much more compact than your existing table, showing you which districts allow which uses under which terms. Allowed by right, through special use permit, not at all, or only in a master plan development, for example. The classification system or names given to the land uses have been kind of cleaned up and modernized, and we try to group land uses together in broader groupings of uses, of functionally similar uses, and we think that'll provide for a sort of more accommodating and flexible environment for new technologies and land uses and new businesses coming into the county, and not relying on this sort of line-by-line, highly detailed listing of business types, candy shops, ice cream shops, but rather saying those are eating places and they're allowed in these type of districts, just as an example. There were other minor changes proposed to where the permitted and special use symbols appeared in the use tables. Those have been shown throughout the process as highlighted or footnoted, and by and large they were minor in nature. We're always mindful that we don't want to create widespread nonconformities for people, not change the rules of the game unless there's a really compelling public reason to do so. We've proposed some new use regulations for things like riding stables or rodeos in rural areas, or shooting ranges that might occur on property, not with the idea of making it impossible to do these things, but to establish some supplemental rules to ensure that the rights of neighbors are respected, and that there's some sort of predictable rules for how those kinds of land uses occur. We've updated the wireless telecommunication, the cell tower regulations, slightly modeled after some template or model zoning provisions put out by the North Carolina League of Municipalities. Continues to encourage co-location as opposed to building new towers and the likes, and make some technical adjustments to bring those regulations into compliance with federal law. The accessory use chapter has been beefed up quite a bit. We've called out some things that are kind of becoming more commonplace in the modern landscape: electric vehicle charging stations, geothermal heat pumps, heat exchange systems on private property. We've made some proposed modifications to the home occupation or home-based business regulations of the existing land use regulations. Proposed in this new draft are two kinds of home occupations. A rural home occupation, which can be a little more intensive because because it occurs on a larger site, often within a rural area, often screened from the road and from neighbors, sort of relaxing the rules for this new category of rural home occupations and keeping fairly tight reins on the non-rural home occupations. Always with the interest of allowing people to sort of make customary business type use of their primary residence, but in doing so in a way that doesn't create harmful impacts on neighbors. Solar energy, accessory and primary, are addressed in the ordinance, called out specifically. Solar panels are allowed to be placed on houses if in compliance with pretty reasonable rules with regard to building height, where they're placed, and the like. Utility type solar facilities are regulated as are all major utility scale type uses, and generally require a special use permit in just about all zoning districts under the proposed UDO. Temporary uses, again, a different approach in the UDO than in today's ordinance. In today's ordinance, when someone wants to do a temporary use, either for a weekend or a week or two, they generally are told, because the ordinance says so, that they need to make a visit to the Board of Adjustment for approval. And that can create some sort of practical difficulties, because folks are often unaware that they needed to take that step. And obviously the board meets occasionally, monthly, probably at best. And so what we've proposed is a process whereby we've granted the administrators the power to approve most temporary uses so long as they abide by some kind of standardized rules regarding how long they can operate and what their impacts are on the neighbors. If somebody wants to go outside that set of rules, then they would go to the Board of Adjustment for approval. So sort of streamline the approval process, but leaving open the possibility of going to the board if it's beyond the authority of the administrators to approve it. Parking regulations have been updated. By and large, many of the minimum parking requirements, particularly for non-residential uses, have been reduced slightly. Our philosophy is we don't want to over-require from a regulatory standpoint parking, because that leads to a lot of paved area, and some people find that unsightly, and it's maybe overly costly. So we sort of give the market a fair degree of freedom in providing parking to meet the needs of their particular business or land use, and establish some kind of baseline minimums that the ordinance cares about. So we think that'll be a positive impact for businesses. We've established a new maximum ratio for big retail uses, large format retail, what often called big box retail uses. They now will have a minimum parking requirement and a maximum parking requirement. If they want to exceed the maximum parking requirement, they'll need to come in for approval. The parking chapter also builds in a whole lot of flexibility to approve administratively some alternatives to always providing parking on site, whether you share parking or provide it on adjacent lot, or you have other means of meeting the access needs for your land use. The ordinance sets up some flexibility that's not present in today's ordinance, and we think that will work well for a lot of land uses. In the parking chapter, one change we've talked with you about in the past is a new requirement that all parking lots with 5 or more parking spaces need to be hard surfaced. No gravel parking lots if you've got 5 or more spaces. The ordinance does retain language authorizing waivers to be granted for industrial uses and uses in that very rural, the RA zoning categories. The RA, you do RA 200, the RA 40, and the RA 20 would be eligible for waivers, but everybody else who's doing a parking lot of any size will be required to provide hard surfacing in the future. The sign regulations have been updated and modernized. We think the changes will probably result in a system that'll be fairer, particularly for properties with multiple businesses on them, think shopping centers and the like, by allocating the allowed signage by the amount of wall space that the business has. We also believe it'll be easier to administer and provide and still retain a fair amount of flexibility for the overall multi-tenant shopping center or office center owner. We've reduced the allowable freestanding ground sign heights from 25 feet today to 12.5 feet under the new UDO, except in the highway commercial category where we've retained the 25-foot limit. So that's a key substantive change. We've also mandated in the ordinance that freestanding signs must, in the future, be those monument-style signs that hug the ground, a monument, as opposed to a pole sign, the sign where the box sits atop a skinny cylinder or pole, except along Highway 74, where pole signs will be allowed in the future, as today. Mentioned the multi-tenant developments, the landscaping chapter. Really, the revisions there are by and large of a clarifying nature. We have added some new language regarding the authority to approve alternative compliance, what we're calling alternative compliance landscape plans, that may not meet the letter of the ordinance in terms of precisely putting a tree here or the number of plants, but provides at least an equal or better level of landscaping. This is a procedure that we've used successfully in a lot of other codes to really good reviews, both on behalf of the property owners and the design professionals, but for the community as a whole. New outdoor lighting regulations have been added to the ordinance that will provide a predictable means of sort of gauging the lighting impacts of a new proposed land use prior to it causing problems for a nearby property owner, particularly for residents. The development improvements chapter, which mainly deals with kind of property that's being subdivided but could come into play on any major development, is proposed in the county. New requirements for performance financial guarantees, requirements that property owners associations be formed whenever there are improvements within a new development that are to be owned or maintained in common. New standards regarding the length of blocks in new subdivisions with a mind towards addressing some of the access and connectivity issues that I think you've been hearing about when you've talked to your comp plan and transportation planners. That said, those standards being added, there are still exceptions granted to those rules when the presence of natural resources or significant topography or other situations would prevent you from complying with those standards. The private drive regulation, something we spent talking about a fair amount with staff and kind of going back and forth on. In the end, the private drive regulations from the existing land use ordinance in terms of who may use private drives as opposed to new streets, public or private, will remain the same as they are today. The only change will be that new private drives created after the effective date of this new ordinance will need to be provided within a perpetual access easement that is at least 20 feet in width. So who may use them remains the same. We've added some safeguards to ensure that reasonable access is maintained over time, including the coverage of that private drive by a maintenance agreement that's signed on to by all current and future owners to help try and avoid problems down the drive. Street standards. The big change here is we've proposed the standard that's been used pretty successfully throughout North Carolina in our experience, and that is a new requirement that the second lift of asphalt or of road surfacing be delayed until at least 75% of the lots within the subdivision are occupied. That can help with the seasoning process for the base course and prevent problems caused by service and construction vehicles running over those roads prior to the subdivision being turned over to the residents. So 75% of the lots will need to be occupied before that final road course is applied within new subdivisions in the future. Underground utilities will be required in new developments in the future. Today's ordinance mentions underground utilities, but establishes it as a guideline rather than a requirement. This is utilities interior to the development, not necessarily requiring that utilities within the public right-of-way adjacent to the development be buried or placed underground, but new utilities within the development. Some technical changes to the flood damage prevention chapter that brings the regulations into alignment with some state rules that have changed over the past couple of years. The one substantive change is a clarification. Beyond that, those technical changes I mentioned, the other change I wanted to bring to your attention is the clarification of when the flood damage rule, when the flood plain regulations apply to development that has done a series of kind of minor changes over a period of time. If over a 5-year period the cumulative cost of additions or improvements exceed 50%, then you need to comply with the ordinance. That's unstated in the existing ordinance, and there's been some sort of back and forth questions over the years about who needs to comply when piecemeal changes have been made. Again, I think that's consistent. We know that's consistent with state law, and will provide better clarity for property owners, applicants, and administrative staff. You've heard us talk in the past about 2 new features of the ordinance that are really being added to comply with some state requirements that go hand in hand with the 12 Mile Creek wastewater treatment plant expansion, the requirement for riparian buffers within that watershed area, within that service area. In the future, riparian buffers for new development will have to be established, and the width of those buffers from the stream bank will depend on whether it's from a perennial stream, a stream that carries water year-round, or an intermittent stream that carries water only generally after a storm event. The perennial stream buffers are 100 feet in width, divided into zones of varying intensity of what's allowed. The intermittent stream buffers are reduced to 50 feet, again with a sort of very strict 30-foot zone where basically nothing can occur, and then the outside 20 feet are more relaxed in terms of what might be allowed, utilities, trails, things like that. Sunflower protection is the second part of the agreement with the state to allow the treatment plant expansion. The Schweinitz sunflower is being protected by some new provisions that will require that developers, again within the wastewater treatment plant service area or watershed, will need to conduct a vegetative survey to see if these sunflowers are present on their property, and then propose a plan either to preserve them on site or to relocate them to another site. The review and approval procedures I mentioned before have been all consolidated in one place in the ordinance. They're currently found in several different articles of the existing land use ordinance, Articles 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 20 all contain various procedures under the ordinance, and it's sometimes kind of difficult to find the section that you want to be in. We start that article with a table that shows which review and decision-making bodies are involved in which approvals, ranging from staff to the Board of Adjustment, the Planning Board, and obviously ultimately the County Commission. A new vested rights procedure is proposed to the ordinance, reflecting North Carolina law and just providing some clarity about how vested rights determinations or proclamations are granted in association with new development approvals. We've revised the notice provisions to be very reflective of state law. It'll be your prerogative as a matter of practice to exceed those, but we've proposed in this draft that they merely establish what your minimum requirements are. I mentioned the conditional rezoning in conjunction with that master plan development I spoke of just a moment ago. This will replace your existing 2-step conditional use process with a 1-step legislative process. And part and parcel of that is a whole lot more flexibility for you, a whole lot more clarity and simplification in terms of the process that's followed, in terms of how testimony is taken at the public hearing, and the types of conditions that can be either requested by the applicant or imposed by you all. It will establish a fairly robust public process for review, including a community meeting even before any public hearings are held. And it can be used to tailor either what would otherwise be a straight zoning request to, say, an R10 classification, or it could be a part of that master plan development where you're essentially writing a new zoning district and using the conditional rezoning procedure to establish that new master plan district. New definition of minor subdivision changes the limit on the number of lots that can be created out of a single parcel from 5 to 8. This goes hand in hand with some refinement of the definition of exempt subdivisions, taking into account some things that are exempt under state law. Major subdivisions, those that don't qualify as minor because they involve public improvements or a number of lots that exceeds the minor definition, would be approvable all at the administrative staff level under the new UDO. It won't be going to the planning board. It won't require approval of what you now refer to as a major development permit. So both the minor and major subdivisions will be approvable at staff level. The nonconformities chapter has been reworked in a couple of ways. In some ways, it's been made more accommodating of property owners who may be beset by some kind of loss or damage due to acts of God. In those cases, the ordinance is a whole lot more forgiving in terms of being able to rebuild what was on the property before, whether it's a land use or a structure. In other cases where it's there's a sort of voluntary change to another use to bring it into compliance, the ordinance is a whole lot more clear on you can't go back. We think it reflects modern practice. It'll be a very clear approach for everybody, and I think it will help those who are, as I say, who suffer damage due to a storm event or a unintentional fire. And technically, the existing ordinance says they can't rebuild if it exceeds 50% of the value of the structure. We removed that restriction in case of a act of God loss. Violations and penalties chapter has been expanded to just bring into play the possible use of a full menu of penalties and corrective actions that can be taken to encourage people to bring their property into voluntary compliance with the ordinance. Measurement chapter has been illustrated. We've revised the definition of height to take into account pitched roofs on buildings. Currently, the ordinance says you always measure to the top, which kind of penalizes people who want to use a pitched roof design. We're proposing measurement to the midpoint on a pitched roof and to the highest point on all other roofs. Number of edits to the definitions, deletions of unused terms, and of course additions of new terms that have been brought into play by this revision. Now, that was kind of long-winded. Again, I was unsure about how many in the audience had an opportunity for that tour, so thank you for indulging me. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions, gentlemen? No? All right. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
I just wanted to make one final comment. Having gone through this before in another jurisdiction, there is no such thing as a perfect ordinance. So be aware that at some point in time, we may very well find that there are things that need to be amended in here, maybe through the process of practical use of it. We may find there's an issue that didn't work the way we thought it would work. So I just want to remind the board that oftentimes we do find things that are either missing or that we just didn't anticipate that it was going to work that way. So don't be alarmed if a few months from now we come to you with a change that says, hey, we need this change because it didn't work the way we thought it would. I think sometimes some boards have thought in the past that I've worked with that when you adopt the ordinance, it doesn't need changing for a long time, and there's no such thing as a perfect ordinance. So just want to remind you of that. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you, sir. All right, that'll bring us to item number 3 on our agenda, informal comments. I will remind everyone wishing to speak that you must address the board from the lectern. Begin your remarks by giving your name, stating whether you're a resident of Union County, indicating the municipality within which you reside, if any, and state the topic about which you intend to speak. Each speaker will have 3 minutes to make remarks. A speaker may not yield any of his or her time to another speaker. I move that we close the last public hearing. Oh, I apologize, yes. There was no one signed up to to speak in the public hearing, and therefore I'll close the public hearing. Now, back to the informal comments. You've heard what you need to do, Mr. Tony Way, so if you'll come on up and address the board.
Don't worry, I'm not here to propose another monument. I'm just here to recognize the passing of Mrs. Maddie Clyburn Rice. She passed away September of this year, September the 1st. She was born in Marshville. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't get my municipality, Indian Trail, Union County.
Thank you.
She passed away in High Point in a hospice house on September the 1st. She was born in Marshville, North Carolina, September the 15th, 1922. She's the only known African-American daughter descended from a slave in the United States, as far as I know. Her father played a role in the Confederate government, and her last request was to be brought back to Monroe and buried in her father's grave. She's going to be cremated and buried in her father's grave. The Sons of Confederate Veterans is purchasing a stone for Miss Maddie, which will read, beloved mother, Maddie Clyburn Rice, September 15, 1922, September 1st, 2014, real daughter of the Confederacy. Her legacy will remain for generations. As of now, we got a resolution from the mayor of High Point, North Carolina. This is the closest city to where she lived. Got a resolution from the mayor of the city of Monroe, Bobby Kilgore. We're going to have a prominent guest in here, former U.S. Congressman Ben Jones. I don't know how many of you know him, but he was a player in the old Dukes of Hazzard series. He was Cooter. So he's going to be here. We've been getting cards and letters from all over the country, and I know that Monroe and Union County is going to be packed. Our memorial service is going to be on October the 18th at 2 o'clock in the afternoon at Hillcrest Cemetery. That's 1000 Adams Street in downtown Monroe. 16th, South Carolina Color Guard will be coming out from Greenville to help out with the memorial service. There'll be a cannon battery here. The Monroe Fire Department is going to participate. There'll be the UDC president from North and South Carolina will be here to speak. And there's just so much, okay, I'm done.
Well, you please continue.
Union County Commissioners, y'all, if you want to write a proposal and recommend, a proposal be passed for Miss Maddie's passing, or if one of you would like to speak, at her memorial service, that would be great. I think that we need representation from Union County there, being that we're going to have so many out-of-town visitors and out-of-state visitors. And now I know we've got people even as far away as Maryland. We've got a big contingency coming out of Virginia, South Carolina, Tennessee. They're coming from all over Georgia. So there'll be people from all over to attend this milestone. And Miss Maddie wanted to go out with a bang, so that's what we're going to do. She's going to go out with a bang.
Well, thank you for sharing that.
Big artillery piece. So I would like to propose maybe that Union County Board of Commissioners adopt their own resolution, Miss Maddie's passing.
All right.
Also, she was a federal employee. She was a retired VA nurse, and they retired her in 1979 because of her heart. And that's government efficiency. She died this year. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. White. Appreciate that. All right, that will conclude our informal comments, and that will bring us to additions, deletions, and/or adoption of the agenda.
Chairman,
Yes, sir.
I'd like to ask that we add the consideration of the Unified Development Ordinance to the agenda this evening.
All right. We will put that, let me find it here. Put that under new business. business again. I've forgotten the way, there it is. All right, we'll put that under new business, item number, golly, Duddy, where does it start? We have that much new business? Be the first item under new business.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to, if I may ask the manager one quick question. Madam Manager, I was looking today on item number 8 when we're looking at basically what I consider to be the backbone of our collaborative group that's been put together per the legislative act. I didn't see a presentation. It was my understanding through a colleague of mine here on the board that we've requested that on 2 occasions. I didn't receive. Have we received that yet?
We have not.
I did get also for the board an email today from one of the Board of Ed members that came out very late regarding that. So I'd ask that we pull item number 8 and schedule that, Mr. Chairman, at the time that after we've received the presentation.
Okay. All right. Any other additions, deletions?
That's the exemption on the appraisal services for the human
Oh.
services.
My apologies, yes. We will add that as new business, number 7A.
What was that, Mr. Chair?
7A on exemption of surveying services from the RFQ process. I believe you all received an email on that on Friday. All right, any other additions, deletions, and/or motion to adopt?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion we adopt the agenda as amended.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? None? All right, and that will bring us to Mr. Simpson. Oh, I'm sorry, hang on. Let's do the consent agenda. What do you
Motion to
say?
approve consent, Mr. Chair.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? None? Now, Mr. Simpson, we'll turn it to you.
Thank you. Yeah, got out of the chute quick. I know people probably get tired of my cliche of talking about the wheels of government turn slow, but I don't know how long ago it has been. Time flies in terms of when we added to the budget additional funding to move forward on the process of rewriting or at least streamlining and improving our development ordinance. I at this time want to thank Brian and Dick Black and Lee and Joe and the whole crowd in that office that have worked so diligently with our consultants through this process. I know that we ask on numerous times that we do everything possible to vet this information and to provide it to the community such that they could provide input, and I think it has been an open and transparent process. I know we involved early on, I participated in a couple of those stakeholder processes where we looked at each particular item in an effort to, I hesitate to say bring us into the 21st century, but certainly there was a lot of things in our ordinance that needed changing. And I think that this document, this process has done that, and as Brian pointed out, it's not perfect. We'll always have opportunities down the road for change. But I wanted to, I think it's time to move the process forward. We had a couple of opportunities in the last month or so to make some zoning changes, and I was a bit dubious about that simply because I knew this was so close, and I would have preferred that we have got this done before we made those, but certainly that was not the case. I know the planning board, I believe, voted unanimously, 5-0, to approve this. So having said that, I would like to first move that the board adopt the applicable consistency statement for adoption of the Unified Development Ordinance of Union County, North Carolina, and I believe everyone has received a copy of that document.
in favor? Aye.
Aye.
This is of the consistency statement. All in favor of the consistency statement? Aye. Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to also move that the board adopt the Unified Development Ordinance of Union County, North Carolina, to become effective upon adoption.
All right. Got a motion on the floor. Any discussion? Mr.
If I
Thomas?
could just point out a couple of things from my perspective. I also want to echo my appreciation to the staff for all the work and considerations. A couple of things that we learned from this is, one, I didn't realize that Union County, I think I heard along the way, if it's not the top, it's one of the top 5 counties that has the most endangered species out there, which creates a unique challenge for you guys. I never thought we had endangered sunflowers, to say the least. But as Commissioner Simpson said, it does bring us into the 21st century. It makes it contemporary. But from our perspective, sitting here, when you look at, and I know, Dick, you probably are tired of it by now, but for the last 4 years, standing in front of us with a whole list of uses, and when we approve for someone to use something to be able to generate income and a livelihood and continuity for their family, we have to consider bingo parlors and strip joints and everything else that's thrown into the soup. So from our standpoint, I think this will certainly help future boards in being able to curtail without overextending government's role in land development. But last but not least, as an aside, Kurt, I've got to have a little fun. I think it's important for the public to understand this has been almost 4 years going, I think it is, and we've been through every module. There's 4. We've been through at least one work session in the public, and then one-on-one and private, and then multiple conversations and hours studying this thing at home. And I think, Kurt, you said tonight, apologize for being long-winded. It was 30 minutes. I thought that just sums it all up right there. But great job, guys. We appreciate everything you've done to get this document where it needs to be.
Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? None? All right, thank you much. And now we're going to go back and pick up item number 6 under old business, which is our EMS working group.
The Board of County Commissioners at your meeting of September 29th discussed 2 options associated with your emergency medical services, provision of services, and determined to establish a working group in order to study and recommend a deployment model and metrics to be presented to the board for consideration no later than November 15, 2014. I went to staff, Mr. Lutz, as well as to the fire chiefs, and received names from them. They are present in your agenda package for your consideration and whatever action the board deems is appropriate.
All right. I will ask that we add another section under community members and add the name Butch Plyler for consideration. Any other?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Helms?
after working with the Sheriff's Department, they being such a critical resource in the county, I ask that we add the sheriff or his designee to this list as well. I think they can be invaluable in identifying movement in the county and be a critical player in this EMS role.
Very good, thank you. Any others? All right. Council, do we need to do these individually, or can we do them as a group, or how would you prefer?
You can do them either way. If you think the board is going to agree them and bank them, you can do that. You can also take them individually. It's up to you.
All right. All in favor of appointing Johnny Blythe, Billy Knupp, Rob Fitzgerald, and Don Gaddy? All in favor? Aye. Aye. Opposed? None. All in favor of appointing Curtis Teague, Larry Brinker, Sharon Crook, and Gary Silsby under county staff? Aye. Aye. Opposed? None. All in favor under Carolina's Union Healthcare appointing Michael Lutz, Alicia Campbell, Tim Adams, Joey Hendricks, and Greg Cowick? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? None. All in favor of adding community member Butch Plyler? Aye. Aye. All in favor of appointing the sheriff or his designee? Aye. Opposed? None. Thank you much. Okay, and that will bring us back to item number 7.
Let May I ask a
Yes, absolutely.
question that's somewhat selfish of myself? Is it presumptuous to assume that it's going to be Commissioner Helms and I?
Thank you, Commissioner, because you are also supposed to appoint 2 commissioners.
All right.
And they have not been named by staff because I thought that was presumptuous.
Can I ask one other further question also? In terms, since there could be financial implications, is there any need to have Jeff as a part of this for this group? I mean, it's fine to sit and talk about stuff that we want, but we need to consider
I think
cost.
you can do it one of 2 ways. You can have him as part of the group, which could be very time-consuming considering the fact we're in the middle of the budget process, or you could indicate to the working group that any proposals that they come up with would have to go through him for a cost analysis. So it's whatever the board's preference is.
I think in the end, we want what's best in terms of safety, but at the same time, we need to know what kind of costs we're looking at. So I mean, and I understand the time, especially leading into the budget season, is going to be very tight for Mr. Yates, but at the same time, I think it's good to have feedback from his department in this. So I'd like to see that if possible. If it's,
All right. All in favor of adding Jeff Yates as an ex officio member? Aye. Opposed? None. All in favor of appointing Commissioner Richard Helms and Commissioner Jonathan Thomas? Aye. Opposed? None. There you go, boys. You got it.
I must thank you, Commissioner Thomas, because I had failed to remember that. So thank
That's
you for
fine.
bringing it up.
I don't want anything to slow this process down. We got to get a response.
All right. How about a presentation reporting the activities of the Monroe Union County Economic Development Staff? Mr. Platay.
Chairman Nicholas, Commissioners, Manager Cutter, thank you so much. It's my pleasure to be here tonight. I want to give you just a quick review of our work plan, again, as we talk about this. And I apologize, the video, the presentation is skewed off the page a little bit, so if you have any questions, just stop. Again, the work plan is the guide to the staff and the Board of Advisors to ensure that we stay consistent. We work that plan to the common goal of Union County for economic development. With that, there are 3 outlying pieces that are the real goals of the organization. That is to create more job opportunities, to generate more tax base, and to better define Union County to the business community at least. And we do that focusing on 3 focus areas of the precision manufacturing, agribusiness, logistics, and the commercial sectors. Excuse me. We have several business strategies. First and foremost, the board has made this their priority, is to focus on existing industry. We do that with visitations, seminars, grant assistance, and an industry appreciation event every year. Also through product development, speculative building initiative, which is what helped us land the Landmark Pharmaceutical Company to the Monroe Corporate Center, industrial park development, rail site development, which we're in the process of with the Shannon Farm property down in Mineral Springs, and our office park identification, primarily in the Stallings and Indian Trail area. Also marketing, awareness, and the recruitment side. Again, looking at improving the awareness through advertising. Specifically, the biggest piece that we've ever done is that Charlotte Business Journal supplement that was put in. Has generated a lot of positive media for us. The social media that we do, particularly with Gretchen Carson heading that up, and held up as an example of best practices. The recruitment missions obviously are active through going to Farnborough to the air show, to even staying local, doing things with the North Carolina Military Business Center up in Winston-Salem here just a few weeks ago. And then partnerships with the Union County Chamber of Commerce with events like they just had with a great successful week of manufacturing awareness, as well as the Make It in Union County initiative we started in our office and then we spun out to the chamber. Looking at the budget, obviously the budget is contributed $400,000 by the county, $300,000 by the city of Monroe. That 700,000 is broken out in this allocation. The biggest focus, again, is looking at the marketing side as well as the mission trips, lead generation, existing industry, while being the priority of the office, is a much more affordable mechanism to operate. So it does have a smaller cost footprint. Looking at the EDC process, this year, or this past year, the board wanted to start to identify some ways to show visually the activities in a manner that are clear, trackable, and could be analyzed for trends, similar to what they do in industries. When you go into an industrial plant, a lot of the times you'll see on the wall their visual matrix of where they are. But to do that, kind of just to go through the visualizations that we're using, let's go through the process of economic development. First of all, we have to do research, collect data, develop relationships, generate awareness of the community. So it's basically that prospecting. And then once we have that, we drill down into the data. Then we build and work those relationships to start finding things. And that starts to fill the pipeline of potential projects back into Union County. So with that, this is where it may get cut off. The visual representation of the pipeline is what you see here first. Looking at our goal of $60 million and 300 jobs, we've determined that approximately 114 times at bat should generate us that number at least, if not more. So in looking at that, that's based on previous size of projects, looking at our win ratios, those kind of things is where we came up with 114. For the fiscal year that just completed, so again, our fiscal year runs with the contract, goes from July to June of every year. So completing that in June of 14, the year-to-date pipeline of projects that we generated within that 12-month time frame was roughly 50 projects. We're looking for 114, okay? So that shows you, this is some of the data they wanted to track, and it was because there was a lot of anecdotal data that we had to understand why it was only 50. But we wanted to demonstrate that and show that to everybody, so it's something that we can start to track and see trends. Also, they wanted to see the breakdown of the projects in relation to those targets that we just mentioned, precision manufacturing, logistics, commercial, and agribusiness. And so you see that here, how they break down. And at the end of the fiscal year, we had 25 active projects. So of the 50 that were created, there's still some in the pipeline, because some projects last 3, 4, 5 years. So while their active pipeline will have projects that float over fiscal years, that's the active projects that we have currently that we're tracking. Within the year, we still need to generate somewhere in that 90 to 114 range. If you put it on a straight line graph, you're looking at about 9.5 inquiries per month that we need to generate to hit the 114 number. Looking at last year, you can see where it went flat. Basically, we didn't get a time at bat from basically October to February. And that was during a run of really bad PR that we had from multiple sources. And so once that started to change, we started to see that increase. But we were held basically with zero return of new projects for a long period of time, a substantial impact on us. So that was one of those things we've identified, and that's the reason we did the Charlotte Business Journal piece, was to start to correct some of that. Also, if you look at it, this is what we ended up with at the end of the year. The 25 projects are representative, active projects represented in the funnel. So in that pipeline drops into the funnel and gives you your suspects, which are those companies that are inquiring, showing some wanting some information. There could be ghosts. You're not really sure where they are. The prospects, they've started to show a little bit more interest, and so they've asked for more specific information, more information back to them, like a second round of your interview. And then the projects are those projects that are very interested, where you've been shortlisted, or they've actually come by and visited the community. And that generates then down to the fourth one, which is our announced projects. So while the load wasn't that, we didn't generate a lot of projects, we landed a lot of projects, but they were smaller. So we ended up with about 16 announced projects last year, and that was the breakdown. Again, very understandable given the makeup of our industrial mix. that 12 of the 16 was precision manufacturing, 1 agribusiness, and 3 logistics. And the commercial will develop over time. That's the weakest spot that we have from a product development standpoint in Union County as we sit today. So let's look at the scorecard. So basically, we had $33 million announced within that 12-month period. That's a direct result of not having enough projects, not enough leads coming in the door. But we overshot way over on the job creation with 435. So again, we're still making that run. While we're a very fast-growing county, we're still keeping pace with the job creation and keeping the lowest unemployment in the Charlotte region. So again, we're maintaining that. It's 15 straight years now that we've maintained that. And so the job creation is still there. The tax investment has got to increase. And we are now starting to see a trend of that. So if you look at it, this was, again, part of the problem, is the funnel was inverted. So we had projects. You know, people sort of, once we got in the living room, we could get the recruit to come. Sorry. But we just weren't filling the pipeline enough. And it was because of that one 5-month run of no new projects coming in the door. Take that to today. So far, we're riding the momentum. We really hit a home run with the Charlotte Business Journal piece. It's probably the most productive marketing piece I've ever put out. It is we've had projects that said Union County was eliminated and came back and said, because of that piece, we now put you back on the list. So it's something that just never had that kind of reaction before. So in looking at where we are today, the pipeline from July 1 to today is actually over this. This is what was presented to the EDC board last month, but it was 19 active projects. But look at the value that's sitting in those projects now, almost $300 million. And our pipeline has grown, the active pipeline. So this building on top of the 25 that we had active, we have 38 currently. But based on where we are on the fiscal year to date of 19, we're still behind, but we're making huge strides over where we were. So we're in about the 78 to 90 projects now is where we're thinking we're going to hit for this year. So, you know, last year was our first year. Last year we had a lot of PR issues. Those excuses are going away. We're up and running. You know, it's now time to do our job and get this thing going. And so that's what we're doing. If you look at it year over year, we're at 19 for the year like we just showed, but it shows in relation to last year where we are. So we're starting to really make momentum. And I think this is just, we've laid the foundation. We're really going to start to see some things grow with some other events that we're putting on here in the next couple months as well. The other thing that the board wanted to do is not only see a representation of it, but give us an indication of where we are. You know, is this indicator, oh, great, you got 19. Is that good, bad, ugly? You know, what does it mean? So we started to look at, let's put a status on it. You know, if we're supposed to make 9.5 a month, and those are cumulative, so the 19 is not 19 in September, it was accumulate, you know, adding up over each month. Are we 80 to 100% of our goal, 60 to 80% of our goal, or 60 or less? Right now we're at 66% of goal, so we're on a yellow here. So it's something that the board can constantly monitor with us, say, what are you doing to change that? What do we need to do? So it's very active. The board is starting to get very active in pushing staff, which is great. Also, you can now see with the active funnel, it's starting to correct with what we're seeing with the new leads coming into the pipeline. So while it's not inverted, it's kind of an hourglass at this point. But it's nice to see the suspects being more than the projects. So that's starting to correct itself every time because the suspects will trickle into the prospects. Excuse me, again, we looked to make measurements on this and give us a simple green, yellow, red on the status of how we were doing. And again, there we are. Suspects and prospects being on yellow and projects clearly being in green, substantially higher at 15% of the total pipeline, active pipeline. Well, we've had 4 announcements this year, and those announcements have equaled $23 million. Last 12 months, the previous fiscal year was 33 million. We're at 23 already. And we have, hopefully in the next month, 2 more announcements that would exceed $20 million. So combined would exceed $20 million. So we're looking at already being almost 80% of our goal, 90% of our goal for this year in investment. And the job creation is right on track. Should be 75 jobs. We're at 81. So this year is starting out very good. Again, building on that momentum, getting through the the construction of the office, getting everybody on board, working with all the towns. So we're moving very strong. So again, the recent announcements this year: Charlotte Pike, Harris Teeter, again, Glenmark Pharmaceutical. To give you an example, Glenmark Pharmaceutical was the fastest project we've ever worked on. From the time that we saw them to the time that they bought that building, it's 47 days. They outran themselves on a lot of things. It was an incredible process. Harris Teeter, 363 days. Relatively simple project, but it just took a long time. So, and that's more the typical project. It's 18 months. So Glenmark was extremely atypical, but it's a very, very good project for us, and that will continue to grow as we've talked about before. GM nameplate as well. Very active projects we've worked in the beginning of in this first quarter of this fiscal year in Legal Pad, Sash Flare, and Cherry Pie, and which was a very public project for us down in Waxhaw. Unfortunately, Legal Pad we have lost. The up until 5 days of them notifying us, they said that they were going to sign the letter of intent on the property. They were filling out all the information for the state. Every hurdle that they asked for, we achieved and surpassed. Sometimes they just go wrong. And so it's unfortunate that we lost that project, but there were no indications, real strong indications, that we were going to lose that project. But again, moving forward, that project allowed us to put a lot of focus on a $40 million development down in Waxhaw. Because of that, they've got a lot more tenants interested in that project, and it's moving forward. So it's still, the positives are there, even though we didn't necessarily win that specific project. The overall development will grow and be in place here shortly. The other thing that we're looking at is, and we've talked about this for a while, but it's putting together our READY report. The board keeps changing it, and so we haven't really put it out there publicly yet. So we've added a lot more pieces to it, to the point that it's almost too busy. So we're going to actually break this out to a 4-page report so that we can expand, but it clearly demonstrates all the metrics that are there, as well as some other aspects. The unemployment rate, show where we are in relation to the state, as well as sort of the project lead source, where we're still generating 47% of the leads into our office. While that's great, we'd love to have those grow in other sectors as well as our existing industry makeup. So there's other things out there, our trips, where we're going. We want to be as transparent about our operation as possible. Obviously, our projects, no one's going to know about the projects outside of code names or until it's time to release that information. But everything else about our office, we want to make sure it's public and people can scrutinize where they want to. After all, it is their economic development office. So I think overall, we've had to overcome typical first-year challenges, the PR issues and other distractions, including the loss of our chairman, Clark Goodwin. But we've laid a great foundation. We've developed trust with our municipalities. In fact, today I became a member of the Economic Development Advisory Committee for the town of Indian Trail. So we're also on the board, the Economic Development Board for Waxhaw. So 2 of those that had a lot of questions about this initiative and now incorporated us into their EDCs. We worked to reclaim our image, as we talked about with the Charlotte Business Journal piece, that I think 5% of the bad information that was out there was taking over all of the media, and we wanted to really demonstrate how great Union County was. And I think we've done that. A lot of people have generated a lot of positive comments back to us, particularly in the business industry, or the business community. And we've had investments almost throughout the entire county. So we're still working in areas like Fairview, trying to give possibilities there, but the investments are definitely across the board, which is nice. So the board of advisors, the ones that y'all have appointed, are providing great leadership to us and guidance, as you can see by some of the things that we're having to do and push and a challenge. I don't think you'll see this kind of measurements required by a lot of economic development groups. So this is good that we can provide this to you guys, to the other municipalities, and to our citizens. So other than that, I look forward to surpassing our goals in fiscal year 14-15. Looks like we've got a great start. So outside of that,
Any questions
the
for Mr.
report.
Platay?
Very good job. I have to tell you, it's refreshing to see the measurables and how you quantify so much, because I think that was the frustration that led us to the point of having to make a decision. And in hindsight, I have to say it was an excellent decision in joining with Monroe and the energy with you and the staff with the EDC, and very, very good job.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the support. And I did wear baby blue for you
Orange for you.
Mr. Platay, is there any discussion on building another spec building?
Yes, sir. The city of Monroe is going through a transition of leadership right now, so hopefully after the 15th of October, when Mr. Larry Faison comes in as the city manager, we can sit down and start discussing that.
Well, you mentioned that the pharmaceutical company went so quickly. Do you attribute any of that to that spec building being readily available?
Absolutely. We had 4 projects looking at that building at one time, including an aerospace project we worked for 3 years that we ended up losing because the pharmaceutical came in, but that's fine. The pharmaceutical is a newer industry that we've not had, and their investment was about 3 times.
Now, with 4 companies looking at the same time, are the other 3, do we have any other property that would meet their specifications?
No, we are out. If you, the Ready report, which we didn't really highlight in this piece, but we only have 3 buildings over 40,000 square feet in the county that are worth showing anybody. And those, even those are suspect. They're either shorter, they're good buildings, they're just short, they don't meet certain qualifications, they're divided. It's not an open flowing space. So we have a real challenge with product. So we were in great shape, and then Charlotte Pipe took the old HD Supply building, and then Spec building left. Those 2, boom, boom, that was it. So all the projects that we had sort of in that were so close, had to go, and they were on a time frame, so we had to choose other properties.
Good, all right, thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Okay. All right, that will take us to item number 9, appointments to boards and committees.
Mr. Chair, have we done the exemption of surveying services?
No, we haven't.
Then we'll do it now.
That's a great idea, let's do that. Ms. Cotto,
Yes, sir.
go ahead.
As the board will recall at your last meeting, we moved forward with the acquisition of property for the Human Services Building. As you will remember, we have a 90-day due diligence associated with that particular purchase. One of the things we have to do as it relates to that property is surveying services. Under general statutes, it does require that we go out and do an RFQ process unless the services are less than $50,000, under which circumstances the Board of County Commissioners can in fact waive that. So we are requesting, because time is of the essence as it relates to this particular property, that the board exempt the surveying services from an RFQ process so that we may proceed forward with getting that property surveyed.
All right, thank you, Ms. Cotto.
So we would ask for a motion granting us that authority.
We're slow tonight, so.
Mr. Chair, I make the motion we grant that authority to staff.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? None. All right, let's try number 9 again. Appointments to boards and committees.
Mr. Chair, I'll take a stab at a couple of them. I move that we appoint Jared McGraw as the school superintendent or designee, and I move that we appoint Deidre Webb and also Jim Chafin. I'll start with those 3.
And that's to the juvenile,
JCPC.
okay?
And I'll make the motion, Mr. Chairman, if you'll entertain the names of Katie Denny Jillian Coley for those under the age of 18. And for the county commissioner appointees, there's 3. There's Rachel Patton, Christopher Westover, and Teresa Holmes.
All right. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? None. And that will take us to the county manager's comments.
I have none this evening.
All right. Mr. Helms?
Yeah, I failed to mention the other day, Commissioner Johnson and I had the opportunity to meet with some very promising young people from the county with the 4-H. They had a board where Senator Tucker and Representative Horn and Commissioner Thomas and I were to answer their questions. I was extremely impressed. County should be proud of these young people. It was a group from all over the county. They were right on target. They held our feet to the fire, I'd say. But thank their leaders, Laura, for what they do and the way they presented these young people. They did an outstanding job.
All right. Thank you, sir. Mr. Johnson?
No comments tonight.
Mr. Thomas?
2 very quickly, well, actually 2 public notices. One, I'd like to thank Mr. Tony Way. I know he's gone for his work with recognition of Mrs. Rice. Also, there had been a kind of an informal community gathering this Thursday at Utah Baptist Church to discuss some county issues regarding, I know specifically the EMS contract and the taxes and so forth that are going on. That has been postponed to October the 23rd at 6:30, at which I assume Commissioner Johnson will join me and Representative Mark Brody will be on hand. And last but not least, I know Mr. Platay was here tonight for his presentation, but we have a large gathering on November 8th and 9th called Warrior and Warbirds. That's a tremendous attraction to the county. We thank you for what you left us here this evening and encourage all the citizens to be a part of that spectacular event. I certainly will be there myself. So, that was your one. A good evening.
Mr. Simpson?
Further comments?
All right. The only thing I'll add is I apologize for the dysfunction of tonight's meeting. I had the pleasure of joining some Boy Scouts on a 2-mile hike yesterday, and I think I must have left my mind on the trail somewhere. So with that, I will adjourn before I screw anything else up. All in favor? Aye.